This week, I've gotten a lot of questions about why people vote against their own best interests. And this comment that you guys are seeing up on the screen is what I decided to make this video on because people don't think. The average person with an IQ of 100 is more concerned with appearances, with being happy, with having fun, disconnected from society in every conceivable way, but believing that they're still part of the elites. That's the only justification that I have for people voting red. But most people don't want freedom. I came to that conclusion a long time ago. And this is the opening monologue. Everyone loves to talk about freedom, but let's be real. Most people don't actually want it. Freedom means uncertainty, responsibility, and thinking for yourself, and that's way too much work for the average person. They would rather have a boss, a government, or some authority figure tell them what to do, just so that they don't have to make real decisions. The scariest part, if you try to break free, they'll fight to pull you back in. Because if you wake up, it forces them to realize that they're still asleep. And this is what I've been preaching for years, is that if you're not pushing back against the system, you're enabling the system to take you from behind. The reason why I talk about Susie Rottencrotch and Johnny Sixpack so much on this channel is because they are the ideal people, interested in very few things. Number one, Susie's behind the Taco Bell wearing a stitch of underwear, and Johnny Sixpack is probably at the tail end of his 30 pack of Miller Lite, which my 30 pack of Miller Lite is now sitting right next to my desk. You can't pass it up. I was at Walmart this morning after the gym. The place was a ghost town. Super Bowl Sunday. Walmart is a ghost town. If that's not a sure sign that our society is in a downfall, I don't know what is. Because I picked up a 30 pack and it was just under $20, and I'm like, damn, that is some cheap beer. But aside from that, Susie, how do I put this? Susie's mind is simple, right? Very functions a lot like a cockroach. Food, sex, shelter. That's it. And most human beings have turned into creatures that are entirely based on survival. Because things like leisure, free time, work-life balance, vacations, anything that's real that engages us, is too expensive. The rise of video games isn't an amazing coincidence. It's a direct response to a niche created by people who didn't have the money to go on real vacations. It was a market that exploited people who had no friends, who had no social connections, that could meet people in a game like World of Warcraft, and those were your friends because you couldn't afford to go outside. You don't have the money for gas, your Promobile is dangerous as hell, or you're on the city bus. And for me, for 20 years, all I had was the city bus. That meant that if I had to leave my house, it was for an exact purpose. And 99% of that purpose of leaving my house was just going to work because it was a hassle to get anywhere else. Where am I going to go where I'm going to waste 25% of my day riding on a public transportation vehicle with a bunch of homeless people, with a bunch of addicts, and with a bunch of people that are in the same boat that I am? We don't like poor people, and we are poor people. That's a conundrum among the lower classes, and it's a great way of keeping us docile. We don't like to admit to ourselves how hard up we are. And when we see poor people, especially homeless people, I believe it triggers a part of your brain that instantly causes you to dislike that person. So among the proles, among the lower classes, we are our own worst enemy. because we're not going to do anything collectively because we don't think we're part of that group. Everyone thinks they're better than the bottom. But I'll tell you 99%, you're not. And the fact that it is so easy to keep people angry at each other rather than pointing at the thing that makes them poor is what causes our society to be able to function. And with that said, let's segue into my first talking point. People confuse comfort with freedom. I've said this for years. True freedom comes with uncertainty, risk, responsibility, and most people would rather have a predictable routine, even if it means being controlled. Yesterday, while I was talking to career services, one thing that kept coming out in our conversation was, I don't know how to do anything different. I've been working in technology since I was a teenager. I've never wanted to work in it. I don't have any certifications. I don't have a STEM degree. I had no interest in working in general. And then when she asked me, well, Steve, what do you want to do? And I said, well, in my free time, I think about destroying all corporations. And she's like, well, unfortunately, if you show up at the interview and you tell them that your 5-year plan is to destroy all corporations, they may not want to hire you. Well, I guess it's back to working at the customer service desk at Walmart because I just can't bring myself to function. Having a predictable routine is the entire reason why I'm still at my current job. I show up, I sit in my chair, I do as little as humanly possible. I look over at Gen Z that's scratching his rear, and I think to myself, even that guy knows that this isn't good. Gen Z is the first generation to look at a system that's so broken, so disgusting, so dysfunctional, and say, you know what? I don't think so. And corporations hate Gen Z for that. The fact that they have very little soft skills, they have very few communication skills, they don't like working 9 to 5, they don't like the exploitation, they don't like the fact that they can't travel, they don't like anything about this system. And Gen Z has it right. The rest of us are controlled into believing that we're okay. But this constant increases in prices of everything have shown even the other generations that things aren't going to get any better. Things are bad and they are only going to progress in one way, getting worse and worse for the people not making $150,000 to $500,000 a year. That's the society we live in. If you're the average pro right now making $40,000 or less, you're in a world of hurt. I don't know how you're not homeless, other than if you're staying with your parents. Because that's the only way that you're going to make it. Because they've priced you out of life. That's what our society's done. It's priced out half of the people that need jobs out of life. I know people that have been unemployed now for years. And it's not like they're not looking for work. It's just the jobs that are out there, they're not real. The wages aren't real. The job safety isn't real. And they're beginning to realize that they can continually push people down further and further and further because people will not fight back. They love their predictable routines. If, like right now, I went to Walmart to buy a rotisserie chicken. It's about the only place that I think you can buy a rotisserie chicken at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I was walking around in there, and there were still people that I worked with when I got out of school in 2016. They're still there, making the same amount of money. And a lot of those people were going to college. A lot of those people told me at the time, it's like, as soon as I finish my college degree, I'm out of Walmart. So I know that a percentage of the people walking around in that Walmart right now have college degrees. And that's the most frightening part. Talking point number 2. The illusion of choice. People cling to the idea that they have control, even when their options are carefully pre selected by those in power. This is something that really bothers me. Your pre selected choices. Do I really have a choice as to where I can work if I don't have a car? No. Do I have a choice in how much money I can make? No. Do I have a choice as to where I can live? No. Do I have a choice as to whether or not I'm going to be able to eat every day? No. When you look at how limited your choices are, and yet you have people in the mainstream media always talking about the most freedom that uh, that any person can have in the world by living in America, that's not true. Your freedom is solely based on the amount of financial resources that you have. The less resources you have, the more likely you are to have no real choice. I can't just leave where I currently live. I just can't leave my current job. There is nothing, there is no freedom that I feel. Friday at 5 p.m., I get released into the work release program, right? I I do my labor, and I come back to my cell on the weekends. And Monday morning, they open my cell at 8 a.m. again for me to start working and then come back to cell block B so I'm not out causing problems to society. And if you think this is not an open air prison, look at your options. Look at how little you have. You will own nothing and be happy. Unfortunately, we got the own nothing, but we're all collectively miserable. Talking point number 3. People defend the system. The moment you question the system, others rush to defend it, even if it's actively harming them. When people who voted for our current system, when their food stamps get taken away, when they have toll roads that they have to pay to, when public schools are starting to disappear because the money's going into better institutions, people know that the public school system sucks. And if you're a person with even a little bit of extra money, you're going to want to avoid sending your children to a system of education that produces losers. And the reason for that is they're not creating great thinkers at public schools. They're creating factory workers, and they have been for a couple of hundred years. And the reason for that is that they need people to be educated enough to be able to do basic reading and writing skills, some math skills, but they don't need a nation of thinkers. They need people who have the aptitude to work in a factory, be able to do those jobs, because that's the problem with having so many immigrants here, is that they don't speak the language. They take jobs in the hardest industries that don't require an education system in order for them to do it. It's just general labor. But we're a society that has the service industry. And in the service industry, you need to be able to do simple tasks. And those tasks are not the tasks that people want to do. Ask yourself, when was the last time you went to work and were actually enjoying yourself at work? That has never happened to me in my entire life. I go to work, I start working the fry later, I put the fries in the bag, little bro, I put the Happy Meal toy in the box, and I just do that on repeat for the next 8 hours. My motivation only comes from getting out of the way of drinks being tossed at my face, because I'm a terrible human being for wearing that uniform. But we're all wearing that uniform. The uniform of the damned. You look at our cheap clothes, you look at our sad faces, you look at how everyone seems to have this almost given up expression on their face. I see it every day at the grocery store. I see people who are walking through the store, and I hate to say this, but are buying their food on food stamps because their carts are full of junk. junk that if they had to use their own money to buy, they couldn't afford. Like you see so much junk in the shopping carts. Like they're full of Doritos, breakfast cereals, just the worst food, ramen, butter. Like I don't know how the proletariat is still around, other than the more they consume those products, the richer those companies get. And it comes down to comfort food. They're not going to eat a small, healthy salad, number one, because that healthy salad is going to cost quadruple the amount of money that they spent on a box of Cheerios. And that and the fact that they also don't know how to eat healthy. But that's a conversation for a different day. All right, so let's get into our talking point number 4. Most people don't want to think. And this is something that I have found to be true throughout my entire life. Thinking is hard. When you start thinking, you start noticing that things aren't working correctly. Like someone else thought of creating this system for people that they put into this system not to think. Everything in our society has been weaponized against the poor, from transportation to the cost of food to jobs, because you need people to be able to not think, because thinking people will look at a system and say, what's in it for me? And you can't have people thinking that are working in the bottom level of your society. You can't have the 99% asking stupid questions like, what's in it for me? A house? A family? Comfort? No. It's just more work. They don't want to promote you. They don't want you to have a career. They don't want you to have anything. Look at a 35-year-old man working inside of a fast food restaurant. And this is obviously going to lead to people in the comments arguing that fast food and minimum wage jobs are for kids in high school and people who didn't go to college. But that's not true. They want you to believe that's true, that it's the punishment for not going to school. But I'll tell you, as a person who went to a lot of school myself, I've spent my whole life in those jobs. When you look at my job history, it's sketchy. It has a lot of jobs that a person like me should never have had to do. Yet there I am. And when I walk through a Walmart and I see all those people getting close to their 50s, and I know I've seen them working in that same store for 20 years, you're just like, this person's never going to leave. And this job is never going to give them sufficient resources in order for them to be able to live their lives comfortably. And the strange part is that the people that work in these corporations in the higher level positions, right, like regional managers or marketing managers, these people that are making $250,000 to $500,000 a year, these people don't work their way up from the bottom. They know people who bring in people that they like. And that's what makes it so hard, is that the system itself is designed only to work for the people that know other people. The guy working the drive-through isn't suddenly going to wake up and be managing multiple stores. His aptitude for his job has permanently created a position in which he will never be able to escape. And I've noticed this with all of my Gen Z workers over the past few years. Many of them do not have the aptitude in order to be able to get good jobs. And corporations are well aware of that. When Gen Z comes into a corporation and they evaluate your job performance and they rate you a 0 and fire you, it's because they realize that the aptitude simply isn't there. This person isn't going to suddenly realize that they've got to play the game. Gen Z doesn't want to play the game, and the system doesn't want to play their game. So they're not compatible with one another. All right, so I put into toxic positivity today this. It's the corporate approved, society enforced way of gaslighting people into accepting the suffering with a smile. That's the one thing at the bottom that they absolutely want you to have. The service industry is full of extremely low entry level jobs that require you to constantly show that you're having a good time at work. The last thing they want is people showing up at work and showing up how they really feel. Showing up at work depressed, sad, lonely, with a I don't give too many F's attitude, that's not a person that they want. They want a person who shows up, who's so broken on the inside they can barely function, but they want you to constantly be smiling. Remember, it's a privilege to have a reliable job, regardless of what that job is.